Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to attend today's public forum hosted by the Ag Sector Subcommittee of the ENDOW Executive Council. We're excited that each of you took time to come here and took us up on our offer to participate and for being a part of a grassroots from the bottom-up process to stimulate growth within Wyoming's agricultural economy for future generations. I am ENDOW Executive Council member Wally Walski. I'm the chair of the Ag Subcommittee entitled Sustainable Harvest and co-chair of a newly established Rural Council. I'm a lifelong resident of Goshen County. I live on a family farm for the past 40 years, and I'm an alfalfa hay producer. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce my fellow members of the ENDOW Sustainable Harvest Subcommittee who are seated in front here. First, Dr. Ray Fleming Deneen. She's from Laramie County. Next, Miss Mary Elbogen Garland from Albany County. And then Miss Karen Hostetler from Johnson County. So you can see the ladies up here that I am with, so I would think that I'm probably the thorn in the roses at this point. I would also like to recognize members of ENDOW Rural Council who are in attendance here today as well. So when I call your name, would you please stand? We have Miss Cindy DeLacy. She represents the Wyoming Business Alliance, but I know that she is going to be in Cheyenne today. We also have Miss Jamie Carter representing the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts, Mr. Tony Michaeli representing the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. We also have Mr. Scott Smith representing the Wyoming Rural Electric Association, and Mr. Dennison representing the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. And of course, my co-chair, Mr. Jim Epsey, and he's a rancher from Carbon County. Let's give a hand to all our guests that are here. I also see that we do have another member of our Executive Council here with us, and so Jared, at this time, would you please stand to be recognized? Thanks for being here. I want to make some acknowledgement of some key staff people that are here today. First, at the head table over here is Miss Haley McGee. Haley, thank you for everything. Next, over there, Mr. Fong Tran. Fong, thank you for everything. And third is Mr. Ryan McConaughey. Ryan, thank you as well. You know, it's been often stated that today's youth represent tomorrow's future, and thus will determine our legacy. It is with great pride that I publicly recognize a very special participant in the audience today, and that gentleman is recognizable by his dark blue corduroy jacket. We have a state officer from the Wyoming FFA Association with us. Would you please stand to be recognized, sir? Well, I'm proud to say that a long, long time ago, I was an FFA member as well, and I have two daughters that both were also. At this time, I'd just like to see how many former FFA members are in the audience. Would you all please stand? That's pretty good, I would say. Thank you. Before we begin, I want to just take a moment to offer a quick overview of our working agenda. To start with, my fellow members of the subcommittee will be briefly presenting an overview of our ag sector, visit about the House of ENDOW, share the vision and the mission, explain the template we will be utilizing in breakout sessions to develop innovative strategies for potentially expanding or enhancing Wyoming's agricultural sector. After we have systematically divided into working groups, we will begin a brainstorming exercise and thinking outside the box. Then we will identify and prioritize new subsectors and finally target key innovative opportunities for the future. After that, we will all come back together again, and there will be a spokesman for each of the working groups, and they will report to this assembly their conclusions. Following that, at the end of the meeting, we're going to devote some time to public comment, and that's for individuals to express opinions or suggestions. That will be followed by a few closing remarks, and our intentions are to be adjourned around 3 p.m. if at all possible. Each of our small working groups will be led by an experienced facilitator. At noon time, please go and pick up a couple slices of pizza, but return to your small group and continue working while enjoying your lunch. Our goal is to make the most efficient use of your time, so that when you leave today and travel back home from Casper, you'll feel that the time you spent here was well worth your day. So let's begin by giving you an overview of the agricultural sector. First of all, our state's name, Wyoming, is derived from a Delaware Indian name meaning high plains, because of our location on a great plateau where the Great Plains meets the Rocky Mountains. Wyoming also straddles the Continental Divide, which provides the headwaters of 4 major basin drainages that eventually flow into the Pacific Ocean or the Gulf of Mexico. While 55% of our total land mass is directly related to agricultural operations, 48% is owned by the federal government and another 6% owned by the state. However, private stewardship of those public lands have proven to provide critical habitat for abundance of wildlife. About 30.2 million acres within the boundaries of our state are designated for agricultural purposes, with the vast majority remaining undisturbed natural vegetation, or as we more commonly refer to as rangeland. Only about 3 million acres have been broken out of sod to accommodate tillage cropland, primarily at lower elevations with longer growing seasons adjacent to fertile river bottoms. Agriculture is an essential part of our culture and a lifestyle in Wyoming. Our summers are hot and our winters are cold, with a wide range of temperatures in between, and of course we have a lot of windy days as well. However, over half of the state's population, approximately 292,000 folks, have chosen to live in unincorporated rural areas, and either direct or indirectly are involved with agricultural production. Farmers are involved with crop production, and ranchers are involved with livestock production. Today, there are approximately 11,400 farms and ranches throughout the state, with an economic impact of nearly $2 billion annually. Cattle production is by far the largest agricultural commodity produced in Wyoming and accounts for over 3/4 of the total ag receipts. Sheep and wool production is second, followed by hog production. On the crop side, hay ranks as the top, only surpassed in total ag receipts by cattle, and is followed by barley, beets, corn, and beans. Traditionally, Wyoming farmers and ranchers have produced wholesale commodities. Ranchers take their livestock to the sale barn, and farmers take their crops to the elevator, and basically receive an annual paycheck based upon the current market value at the wholesale level. In today's global economy, we must now look into exploring value-added retail markets for both crop and livestock sectors, as well as niches like gourmet beef or organically grown alfalfa. The sole reason ENDOW's Sustainable Harvest is hosting this public forum is to initiate a dialogue within the agricultural community for exploring innovative technology-based agribusinesses and stimulating agripreneurship for the 21st century producers. At this time, I would like to call upon Ms. Karen from Buffalo, who is the founder of Mountain Meadow Wool, to give an overview of the House of ENDOW, and she will also share the mission of ENDOW. Karen?
Good morning. Can everybody hear me from here? If you'll look at the screen, some of you have probably seen this diagram, if you've been following ENDOW at all. Others, this might be the first time you may have seen this. This House of ENDOW has gone under a lot of growth and remodeling. It's still in draft form, and it's still not totally official. It still is morphing and changing. We haven't added any barns onto it yet, but it might happen. It actually gives us a visual, and I'm going to just kind of go over and explain to you what the House of ENDOW, what the purpose of this is. The main thing is the roof, and as you can see, the roof says the next generation job growth. Job growth is the single greatest focus of successful economic growth in measurable statistics, really. So job growth is what we're looking at. We want to keep Wyoming healthy and keep our economy growing by continuing to have growing and viable jobs for our young people, and to just stop the flow of our workforce into other states. So job growth is our biggest focus. The pillars underneath the roof are what support the roof, and those are the economic engines. And these are 5 pillars that we have defined over the last 9 months. It may end up being 4 pillars or 6 pillars. We're not really sure yet. But these are areas of opportunity that have been identified as having the highest potential for growth, whether it's in business trends in the country, nationwide or globally right now, or opportunity that's available because of Wyoming's strengths and expertise. So these 5, we'll just go over them. We are actually representing just one of those pillars today, but some of the ideas that will be generated may cross over into some of the other pillars. So you have advanced manufacturing, and I'll give you, this isn't our committee, but just as a quick little example of what that might mean, it's taking manufacturing to another level for the next 20 years. So what's going to be putting Wyoming in the global forefront of maybe lightweight composites or something of that nature? And then we have agriculture, which we have coined sustainable harvest, and that is because we want a sustainable growth in our agriculture sector. And this is also dealing with new and emerging sectors in agriculture, or actually cultivating better growth in the ones that already exist. So, we're going to do a lot of brainstorming on that one. So I won't even go to all the examples there because I want you to be unlimited in your first hour. The knowledge and creative industry, this encompasses a very large range, everything from financial services to the whole digital industry and computers, coding, all of that part of our growing, those are emerging sectors that are growing very rapidly. So we have one of the pillars focused on that. Value-added natural resources. Wyoming has a lot of natural resources. Of course, we all know that. Oil and gas are going to remain in Wyoming. Coal remains in Wyoming. Can we find new uses for coal? I think there's a company that's looking into things like asphalt products out of coal. That's just one example. And then you have wind and solar, et cetera. Tourism and outdoor recreation. That one has already been a stable pillar of Wyoming, and it's just growing that in what it's going to look like in the next 20 years and how we make it really viable and bringing in jobs. So that's the economies, the pillars. The building blocks, that last line at the bottom, the building blocks are basically what gives stability to the pillars. So in other words, by strengthening those areas on the bottom, we are going to be eliminating some of the barriers for new business, new growth, and enabling there to be a good, solid economy for business to come in. For example, the amenities and infrastructure, you want to be able to have communities that are viable and healthy that people want to live in, and you also want to have a business environment that you can conduct business with air service and broadband and all of those different infrastructure items. So strengthening those areas is going to help the pillars to be able to go forward. And you probably will talk a little bit more about those building blocks, but they just kind of form the basis. Somebody had a question this morning about the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And basically that's, I think as agriculture, we can think about it as creating that nice soil that we can grow a new business and it has everything it needs to thrive. And that's creating that kind of ecosystem with our new innovators. Healthcare, of course, that's not just a Wyoming issue, that's kind of a nationwide issue, but we need to be at the forefront of those issues too and try to get rid of those, anything that's going to stop us from going forward. State capabilities, if there's government regulations that need to change or policies. And then of course you have the big one is what workforce and education. And we have to have a talented and educated workforce going forward. And that's where, you know, the governor's executive order was a start on getting us in that right direction for that. So that's basically the house. Any questions on that? So as far as our mission statement, we as a group, and you know, we're a pretty small group, there's just a few of us, but trying to put together in a very concise way what it is we're trying to do for agriculture. And we came up with cultivating Wyoming's next gen ag. And so, you know, in agriculture, the word cultivating, we're going to try to encourage new innovation, new growth for the next 20 years based on the legacy that agriculture already has in our state. So we wanted that next generation. We're looking at the next 20 years and how that's going to grow for agriculture. Wally used the word agripreneurship. So that is one thing that we would like to build on is those new ideas and going forward. Wally, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes. While Karen has went over the mission, I want to talk a little bit about the vision of ENDOW in general. ENDOW is all about people. When you stop and think about it, people are our most important resource. And as our young folks here, our most important resource seems to be the resources leaving the state. The reason they leave the state is need to have some good paying jobs. And so our vision is, as Karen has said, when you start talking about how we move forward, it starts out with a 20-year vision. And that vision is how do we get to those jobs down the road. How we think we do that, it starts out maybe probably before even a youngster gets into grade school. Because a lot of children that go to kindergarten aren't ready for kindergarten. And then once they are in kindergarten, if they don't learn to read by the first 3 years they're in school, then they're behind. And once they're behind, at that point, you learn to read, and then you read to learn. And so it starts out with young people, and then it goes one step further than that. Once the young people start advancing and they get into middle school, they need to be exposed to different types of skills, just so that they know some skills out there. Once they get into high school, then besides a high school diploma, maybe there'll be an opportunity for them to also get a certificate. And then it goes on from there. Our community colleges in the past have had more of an influence towards, as a stepping stone to go on to the university. In the future, I think community colleges will have a special role in making sure that people have skills, certificates. The one thing that we found out through our visits around the state, when we ask any entrepreneur or company, what's the biggest thing that they could bring to our attention, it's always the same. It's workforce, skilled workforce. So that's part of the vision of ENDOW, is how do we take what we have here, the people, which is our most important source, and get them prepared so that they can be in a workforce, in a skilled job, which is making a good living, and they can still enjoy living here in Wyoming. At this time, I would like to call upon Dr. Ray, and she's going to talk about a template that's going to be utilized today with the economic engines, or as Karen has said, these pillars up here. And so I'm going to step down over by Ray, because in a minute, her and I are going to have a conversation back and forth. Ray?
Yes. Many of you have seen this worksheet if you pulled out the information that came to you through email. And what we're really hoping is that this worksheet won't be confining, but really invigorating in terms of your thinking. We have 4 wonderful facilitators that are going to be part of this conversation with you. So the worksheet's designed to keep you bold in your thinking. The governor again charged us with staying really bold as we think about our work with ENDOW, and you're the ones that are going to get us there. We need to think 20 years out, and we can't do that without you. So as you enter your first group today with your facilitator, let's all challenge each other to stay really bold. The worksheet itself will narrow eventually as the day goes on. That will help us understand what we need on the ground to have this dream come true. But we need your help today to stay bold. You are the experts that have had these thoughts in your life as you've worked with agriculture in this state, and that's what we need you for today. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all of you helping us continue with what the governor has asked us to do, is stay bold in our thinking, and let's get 20 years out. So the worksheet will guide this. So right now, I talked Wally into doing a little role play with me. So we'll see how this goes. We haven't practiced much, so it's a true role play. Okay, so Wally. Okay, we have this group today, and they, on short notice, all come together to be part of this and really help us. So we want them to be bold, and we want them to really think outside the box. So tell me about your bold thinking. So what's an idea that you've been dreaming about or wishing that Wyoming could work at? Tell me what you're thinking.
Well, that's a good question. As I said in my opening remarks, I'm an alfalfa producer. And so I'm on the crop production side and not on the livestock side. And if I have to look outside the box, I know that the people that raise crops, they're limited to about a handful of crops because of our growing seasons. And so I have to look at what would be a crop that would come in that would actually revolutionize farming in Wyoming. And when we're saying thinking outside the box, sometimes you can think about things that could be even controversial. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to think way outside the box, and I'm going to say, what is hemp? What could hemp do for the state of Wyoming? Now that's staying clear outside the box, but that's what you want.
Yeah, so keep dreaming. Give me your wishes and your dreams for hemp. Talk about that. Go ahead, Wells. Hemp, dream, babe.
I don't know anything about hemp. Except that it's controversial at this time. And I can tell you that it is produced in a lot of nations around the world, but in the United States, it's got to go through some hoops before it's going to be able to be raised. Some states are raising, some sizable acres, and other states are just getting ready to go. I know in Wyoming, we're one of the states, I think about 2/3 of the states have something. And so, what could it do? I think it's limitless, I think, because You can produce a crop, and not only can you have that crop at a wholesale price, but look at the products. There's tens of thousands of products that could be developed from hemp. And so if I'm looking at it not just from what I could do on my property to raise it, I'm looking at what markets would be available, and the spin-off of that for the state would be then what manufacturing would be available and what markets would be available. And so,
And is that how we measure it? Looking at some of those factors? Is that how we measure it? Okay.
yeah, it would take a lot, and that's what we have to do. That's part of this group, is to throw out ideas, and then we're going to have to distill them down. We're going to have to bring in experts to look at them, to make recommendations, to find out what can be done and what can't be done. But I think there's an opportunity, and in Wyoming, if you take what our climate conditions are, we can't grow everything. And so maybe this is an opportunity. But you asked me to think outside the box, so I did.
Is there something happening in the state right now that is going to keep us from looking at him? Is there anything that you see in our state capabilities, opportunities, both opportunities and possible gaps that would keep us from being able to think big with him?
I think there's going to be some legislative challenges, and if we get over those. But the idea of it is, if this crop is going to be produced in the United States, and it's just on the cutting edge right now, there might be an opportunity for Wyoming to lead the charge, sort of like when we did in the legislature with blockchain, to get out ahead of the curve. So I just think there's some possibilities that you could look into it. The other thing you have to realize is with technology and genetics and things like that, there's things that could happen with hemp down the road that would overcome some of the barriers that are currently out there.
So you see potential with both jobs and wages with this particular idea?
Particularly direct benefits, but multitudes of indirect benefits, and it all generates around tax and income coming into the state.
Okay, and then what kind of experts do we have in the state, or are we going to need to look outside the state to get experts to help us with knowing how to drive this?
Well, we have some tools that Haley has for us that we'll be able to find out who in the state of Wyoming has expertise, and hopefully from there they will be able to suggest names of other states that are more involved than we are. So it isn't that we'll have to start from scratch. I think that we're on the ground floor, but you know, we don't have to start out at the very bottom. We can capitalize moving forward.
Okay, great. So Wally was just one, and there are going to be 10 of you at each of these tables working on this worksheet, getting your big picture ideas narrowed down. You're going to choose a couple subsectors, a couple ideas. Your facilitators are going to guide you through this worksheet. So by the end of the day, you're going to help ENDOW know how to move forward with agriculture in Wyoming. So thank you, and I hope you're really excited. But we won't make you all role play. We're just going to make Wally role play.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Now I'm going to call upon Ms. Mary, and she's going to discuss how we're going to be divided into the smaller groups and the time frames allotted to accomplish our assignments. So, Mary?
Sure. Okay, so you've heard some of this already, but we'll just go through it again and make sure everybody knows what we're going to do and how we're going to be gathering the information we need. So in the first 50 minutes or so, like we talked about, we're going to be talking about all ideas. Everything that you can think of can be put out on the table. There's no bad ideas. It's a big brainstorm. We want to talk about current opportunities, value added. We also want to talk about what are the long-term opportunities, because our task is to think about a 20-year timeline. So we want to know about now, and we want to know about the future. You all are the experts. We need to hear from you. Your input's really important, and it's going to inform the plan.
Okay, so our group was pretty awesome, as I guess you guys would say your own groups were, and definitely passionate about the topic. So we had lots of ideas, but we settled on 2, as we were told. And we decided to focus on, I'm going to do them in the order that we did so I can remember. Food and ag processing and manufacturing was one of them. And we included ag because we couldn't just have food. So ag also being like fibers and things like that. So in group, please, if I'm not doing a good job, please let me know. So what are the aspirations for this subsector? So because we wanted numbers, and we were told to have some numbers, we put up a number here that we wanted to increase this sector by 30%. And one thing I'd like to say is we were really, in this sector, we talked about food, like actual food, like produce. And then we also talked about food, like things you might process that might be added to something or even stand alone. So there were kind of 2 different conversations, but they did still all fall into this one. And then we also had the livestock and the fiber in here too. So it's pretty all-inclusive. But essentially we think that in this sector that we can increase our different new products by 30% than what we already do in 20 years. And that's probably a pretty conservative number considering that we're expansive in what we're covering. We wanted, from a local food perspective, we thought that local food products in 20 years could be in 70% of our stores. And again, some of that comes from just having that access to our local foods here. We also wanted to establish an environment and a toolbox that allowed for integration. Really, this was the vertical integration and essentially establishing a culture with our farms and ranches that would encourage the vertical integration and growth and value added, so also that horizontal component too. We also thought that a measure of increased processing and manufacturing would be outside investment, so whether that's foreign investment, international investment, or companies from outside coming in and investing in our communities to open companies here or expand companies here and processing facilities here in Wyoming. From a job perspective, we thought that we could increase our jobs by twice at least in the ag sector. And we didn't really put a number, but of course there's all the indirect jobs that come by the growth of this economy, this sector. We also, it's not here, but we talked also about the job retention that comes by having processing and manufacturing facilities here, that there's also some retention in our ag industry. Wally, they're distracting. Oh, it was. We also talked about the fact that by having expanded processing and manufacturing here in Wyoming, that would likely provide a market for our local growers and producers, and so just help in the job retention factor when we think about our local producers and growers. So one goal, we thought it would be cool. At first we were saying red meat, but then we decided to just say a processing plant in each county might be a goal in 20 years. So whether that's wool processing, whether that's meat, whether that's grains, we didn't want to be specific there. And this is ag something sector, I guess I don't. Oh, service sector. So this kind of speaks to the indirect jobs that'll come from growing this processing manufacturing piece, is that we would see a 50% increase in the service sector in ag. So that could include things like marketing, communications, but transportation and other things. So I would say, oh yeah, this one was kind of a big one. Our other one ran out of time. What makes it viable and scalable? We think that there's a demand for manufactured goods. We think that we have the opportunity, so even though transportation can feel like a limitation, there's also an opportunity to enhance our transportation system. And then we also think about the other technologies like vertical gardening, and we also talked about aquaponics and some of the other things that come to the table that can just increase our capacity to help us increase our products by 30%. And some of the gaps we identified were, or what we will need to get there. Profits need to be in place because this is obviously private industry driven, so they need to make money. with margins. We'll need education, and this was something that goes towards workforce and workforce training. We need, so here, the best line, John didn't want to put it, but was make it sexy. So that, right, wasn't that area? Along with this, I think this industry and the conversations we're having is the communication and messaging behind it has to be attractive. But we thought if we could sum it up in 3 words, it was make it sexy. The year-round production and decreasing the seasonality was also important because in food processing or ag processing, we were just speaking specifically to sheep, for example, and lambs, that there's a real seasonality to it, and how can we expand that season in that particular industry. But then if you just look at food processing in general, how do we keep our mills or whatever busy year-round? And so we're going to need to work on that and make that better. And some of the gaps might be access to capital, and whether that's just people entering the market or expanding, better cooperation and more cooperation with regulatory agencies, and we did kind of put an emphasis on the federal side. I would say we all felt like we had a pretty good relationships with our state agencies, and not that they couldn't be better, but particularly with the feds. We also thought that we needed some opportunities around business incubation for agriculture. So really helping people to take their business models and just, whether it's emerging or scaling them up, helping them with research and essentially innovation. So that was that one. The next one I can do pretty quickly because we kind of ran out of time, I think. I don't think we hit all of the categories very well. And they kind of go hand in hand. And again, we started talking about crops, but realized we also had to include livestock. We would want to expand our ag production in the state. And I guess that would be like a quantity, 50% increase in the diversity of products, in diversity, I guess, here, but 50% increase in actual livestock productions. But we wanted to take into consideration the profit margins, and kind of how we captured that conversation for the 20 years. We want to put Wyoming on a level playing field on the world market, and specifically through innovation and differentiation. So not necessarily regulation and subsidies. We were pretty clear, with the roles of government and private industry in our group, and so we just wanted to, we think they're both important, but we think that government's a supporting role, not necessarily a driving role. Some of the gaps we saw were that we need a federally approved meat processing facility, and that's a big target, but if we're going to be increasing our production without this, we don't have anywhere really locally to capture that, and again, going back to the margin piece. But then we talked a lot about workforce development. Of course, that's a conversation around the state. Just the actual numbers, we talked about leveraging, I forget, how did you call it? Not underemployed, but Cassandra, I'm looking at you because you had that word. Like our vets and our disabled.
It's the underutilized or underserved.
Underutilized or underserved demographics. So we thought about that more. We did also talk a little bit about the migrant workforce and how it used to be here and it's not as prevalent anymore. So that was just some things around workforce development. That was it. Did I do okay, Wally, in our time?
Did okay.
Group, did I represent?
Okay, group number 2. Well, we got a couple guys with ties on, but we're going to have a millennium tell us this one.
I feel just a little bit ill-prepared because I didn't bring my flip charts and everyone else did, so I'm just going to go off my notes right here. But so our group kind of discussed, we'll start off first. My name's Quentin Motor. I'm the state vice president, second vice president in the Wyoming FFA. And our group, our main thing we kind of discussed was just kind of promoting Wyoming as a brand. So like, we know that there's a lot of tourism that's one of our main industries here in Wyoming, and people very much are like looking for what Wyoming has to offer. The open spaces, just kind of our ruggedness, our ruralness. So why not promote those things as a brand and be able to sell them to other people? So kind of, what is the aspiration of this subsector? We want to promote Wyoming as a brand, and that it could bring value-added products that could fetch a premium. So we took this into 2 subsectors, and those would be kind of small-scale production and large-scale production. So in this, we want to be able to expand the demand for Wyoming products while best balancing diversity and tradition. Wyoming has a very rich culture, and we don't want to ruin that by trying to be too progressive. So to start off, what are some things that make this aspiration viable? So we definitely believe we have the natural resources and the people to make this happen. I mean, we're already doing these things as a state. Some of the things we talked about, like producing bison, that's something that you could definitely market through a small scale or large scale platform to promote, because people want those unique things that maybe are unique to Wyoming culture. Another thing we discussed were cutthroat trout, trying to preserve some of those things that are unique to our state that are maybe kind of going away. So those are just a few things. And then with legislature, we also talked about how upcoming we'll have the infrastructure, air service, as well as workforce and education training. But we really wanted to make sure that agriculture has an emphasis in those, that it stays in that front focus. We get that we make sure we get the training, and most importantly, put more emphasis on agriculture education in the education system. On top of that, that brings me right next into what needs to happen in order to realize this aspiration. We definitely need to integrate agriculture education more into STEM. So it already meets all the areas. I mean, agriculture by far, it does include science, technology, engineering, and mechanics. It's just finding the ways to put those in the education system to where more kids get involved. You can try to create as many jobs as you want. You can try to get all those opportunities out there for students, but if they're not interested, they're not going to fill them. So I think that all starts at the forefront, working even from kindergarten through 12th grade. We talked a lot as a group about getting agriculture education into those students' minds, putting it right in front of them, where they can learn where their food comes from, they can learn about the agricultural industry, and then in return gain a passion for that. Other things we talked about that we would need, we definitely need to work on high-speed internet. We would need more affordable health insurance for independent employers. It's going to be expensive to get health insurance, and we discussed as a group that we'd definitely like to see it come more affordable, have more healthcare choices, have more healthcare flexibilities for those people who plan on returning to the farm or the ranch, so that way they can be more independent. As well as that, we talked about a lot of things that we would need. We talked about creative ideas to ease land prices for young people trying to get in the industry. As myself, I did not start in ag production, but I would definitely like to get into it. And I mean, somebody needs to die, you need to marry into it, or inherit land for that to happen. It's pretty hard. So definitely just finding creative ways to make that just a little bit easier. And then one big thing is that I've already kind of touched on is culture of Wyoming. We're very rich in culture, but we need to find the best balance of culture with diversity and being progressive. So finding diverse ideas, whether that be technology. One thing that I mentioned in my group is we want to brand these products and we want to send them out globally. And one thing that consumers are really focusing on now is knowing where their food comes from. So we talked about radio frequency tracking and being able to show that products that come from Wyoming, like we can track them all the way through, see where it's grown, and then we can get those premiums globally and sell them locally as well. And people can track their food and know where it came from. Another thing that we talked about was local packing plants and feedlot facilities, making sure that we can keep all our production locally and then continue to sell that brand of Wyoming grown, raised, processed products. One more thing, we talked about water development and conservation. That will all just kind of help play a role in helping to produce those products. And that seems about it. We didn't really get to the stakeholders aspects of that. We're going to all email in ideas on that. We ran out of time a little bit and got rushed towards the end. That's all I can say about it. I'm sure there are probably a few people in my group who have some things to say.
Well, when you have a young man like that who represents the future generation of farming, I think we're in good hands. I appreciate you coming. We're going to do number 3 now, and
what has impressed me the most about this whole day is that watching the group cycle through, we've all kind of concentrated on similar themes. So the first thing we did was just blast out ideas, and then we said, what are we going to pick? And at the end of the day, all of the ideas were interconnected, but we settled down to 2 kind of main themes. What we need is to be able to process what is already in existence, the crops that are here, and have the infrastructure or the ability to do something with them. And then the other main topic was marketing, distribution interfaces with infrastructure, marketing, what is processed. So we said that processing facilities could add value to what is there. And one of the things we talked about is, first, we have to know what is there. What are producers making, growing? And so it is kind of the beginning step is, where are we? And then the ending step is, where do we want to be? And so looking at that, there were many things that we tied into here. We could use test groups. We could look at a food hub, production, technology, how do rules and regulations fit into this? Road, railroads, water. All right, scribe, really. So I have old eyes and terrible reading skills. So our end goal really is to enable Wyoming producers to market, value add, to globally, interstate and intrastate market what they do. So we have a list of stakeholders, the legislature, workforce services, partnerships that already exist, partnerships that could exist, Department of Ag, education, power companies, consumers, USDA, rural development, construction companies, and local planning and economic development groups. When we got to marketing and distribution, we kept trying to put it in steps, and it's really not a step. It is a constant process. So we went to a circle, and if you look at the items on the circle, it's that we may start here with research and development, or we could start here with education and leadership. And it doesn't matter where you start. The point is that you have to keep circling back and reevaluating everything. You have to visit, how is the infrastructure doing? What are the producers doing? What does the market want? And then what do we do to get there? So just some of the things that we put, agritourism, we thought would be a way to develop interest, and very small way, help with workforce development. We have to talk about adaptability and flexibility with the producers who we are trying to enrich, we are incentivizing to grow and try new things. So are they adaptable and flexible, and are there new applications to what they're already doing? Branding, one of the problems we identified was broadband, education and leadership, and so happy to see FFA represented here. I think that that's a great way. And I would add too that I think that if we're going to continue on this route, we need to ensure that vocational education classes stay in our school, so that as kids are trying to develop who they are and what their interests are, that they have the opportunity to dabble, they have an opportunity to take bites out of different segments, whether it's music or greenhouse, it doesn't matter. We have to look at supply and demand, and what do the consumers want? What are the trends? What research has been done? What research needs to be done? And what do the statistics tell us? Back around to workforce training, who are the stakeholders? What kind of transportation do the producers need to compete interstate, intrastate, and globally? Do we have the ability to do that? Product diversification, sustainability, research and development, And here we go around the circle again, the partnerships, funding. Funding is a big obstacle, and I think it's developing private partnerships is something that we need to keep in mind. I think that when we continue to go back to the legislature, who is very much on board in diversifying our economy, very much on board with the ENDOW. Everybody's looking for solutions, but does that mean that government is the only answer? And we would suggest no, that there can be public-private partnerships that also deal with funding issues. So maybe it's pilot projects, maybe it is some kind of granting and financing situations. Non-traditional producers, and we need to continue to think outside the box. And so it doesn't matter where you start on this circle. The important thing is that you keep it cycling. If it's research and development, continue with research and development, because you can't just do it once and stop. You have to continue to know where you are and where you want to be, and who your funders are or could be, what you're producing, and is it what will sell. So again, the stakeholders remain pretty much the same. I think that we all are, that there are a lot of stakeholders that are involved, University of Wyoming, colleges, all of them mentioned in the last one, Next Gen leads, the federal government. We need to invite them as partners, especially in holding down regulation. So, did I cover it, group? Any questions? Okay.
Okay, group number 4, please.
So I'm going to do our first subsector, which is the idea was to create well, first of all, what we wanted to make sure is we didn't, whatever we recommended didn't undermine the industry we already have, but built on it and helped strengthen it, but also expanded it. And so the first idea was the creation of what we called an agri-preneurial processing and innovations network or centers throughout the state. And these would be so that if somebody wanted to create a product of some kind, whether it was creating sausage to be able to sell at a local grocery store, for example, you have to have a clean kitchen. But also for labeling, you have to have the product has to be tested. So there's a lot of different things that go into actually creating an added value product. And the suggestion was that we come up with this idea for these centers where someone could go to test a product, or if you are like at the wool mill that they're trying to create they've been asked to create a new product, but it needs some testing, they could send out to a center to get that tested, but then back at the mill they could actually work on the development of the product. We felt that what this does is increase opportunities for added value, for the value of added value products. It helps create jobs. Just this same thing we talked about. Both the indirect and direct, we've heard most of this before. There'd be more profit and income related to the added value, not just for the person with the product that they were developing, but also for the producer that produced the original meat, whether it's the same person or someone else. What it also would do is help create a local identity. If this was in a local area, the idea of the centers would be that they would be in an area so that it would reflect what the local needs and wants are, and that would help create local identities, and in that way attract others to that community, and it also enhanced the community pride. Our measurable goals were that you'd create 5 to 7 centers throughout the state, but there would also be a networking between those centers, but also with other groups, as we mentioned, say like the wool mill, and they could have a connection to these centers as well. The other thing is that the way you could measure that would be the number of products that actually went to market from there. What makes it successful is demonstrated success from other states. We've seen it, this be done in, I think that the states were Montana and Oregon and other places. We've seen that it's very successful. So we could follow those examples. You have to have a close relationship between your producers and your innovators, and then also private partnerships, whether it's through a community college and a local business group that's trying to develop a product. What needs to happen, though, is that we need to decide really what this would look like, the financing. We have to identify expertise to help make this happen, partners. You have to get community buy-in, and then, you know, also, I guess that would be listed as our gaps: state buy-in, community buy-in, producer buy-in, business buy-in also. Our stakeholders, you know, obviously businesses, producers, our state producer organizations, whether it's the Wyoming wool growers, the state Wyoming stock growers, the wheat growers, the sugar beet producers, things like that. They'd have to also buy in. You need to have the buy-in of, you have to include the community and the colleges, Department of Ag, business councils, and then also it would be really helpful to have somebody who's already done this before. So I think the theme is pretty much is what you've already heard before. We're all thinking along the same lines. And then I'm going to have, Sarah is going to do the our second subsection.
We had the Wyoming market. What would help the Wyoming market to draw people in? And for drawing people in, it'd have higher wages and profits for the economy, and more consumers to spend money at the local places, at the businesses, and the markets, like the farmers markets we had. And then we had 10% more premium for the brand, the market that Wyoming would have, the commodity that would bring people, and you could sell it in different places and have the Wyoming brand. And what needs to happen is the product representation is that we will make our brand more known, like Idaho potatoes, and you know where that comes from, where it's at, the Wyoming made stuff, and then figure out what you are marketing, figure out where people are marketing and where you've been at. If you drive down the road and you go past a farm, you'll get a buzz on your phone that'll tell you where you'll find their market at, or what they sell and where at. And then you'll learn to walk before you run. That's to get ready, learn your stuff from the older generation that can teach you things that you would already know. And that's to market. If you need to go out and learn, if your market or your mentors will teach you how to market, and get out there. And the gaps, the transportation is to get people drawn to Wyoming for different reasons. Technology, like I said before, if you're driving down the road, and you go by a farm or a ranch, you'll get a ding to tell where you can go and get that stuff and what they sell. And the egg producers and consumers goes along with that too. You'll find out where they are and where you can get all your stuff from.
So that was actually age. That there's a gap in age. We have a lot of young people that are interested in. We have a retiring generation, and we have to make sure that we can both have from producers and consumers. We have a different approach to things, and to make sure that that what we're doing can bridge that gap as well.
And the marketing plans versus resources, and that's where you can. How do people know where to find all their stuff in Wyoming, in different parts of the state? where to find your wool producers and your meat producers at. And then you have the ranching and farming where the sugar beets are and all your corn and wheat. And the stakeholders is the Wyoming Business Council, Wyoming Tourism Board, Department of Ag, local producers, local community willing to carry products, and that's the legislature. And that's just stuff that you can get money for this.
Any questions?
Well, big thanks to all the spokesmen. I don't know about you, but for a group of people that didn't know each other to be divided up into groups and to talk and to see what the results are, there's a lot of things that are being said all the way through. So at this time, we've allotted you an opportunity to come forward in a public forum to share anything you want. If you want to expand on this, you have something else you want to talk about, this is your time. So please come up here, whoever wants to, and take turns. So who wants to be first? Just come on up.
So you guys should know better than to give me any kind of opportunity. So I'm Christine Backish-Witch. I neglected to introduce myself. I'm the director for PAL Economic Partnership. But I also, in partnership with the University of Wyoming, Brett Hess, John Tanaka, and also Goshen County Economic Development, Ashley Harpstreet, and forward Cody James Plessens, we spearheaded a Wyoming Agriculture Diversification Summit in January. It was a one-day event. It was an invitation-only event aimed not just at producers. We only had a handful of producers in the room, and the reason why it was an invitation-only because it couldn't get too big. We actually had 84 people come, and it was during the blizzard in southeast Wyoming, so people wanted to be there, but it was essentially agribusiness leaders in the state. So people like Brees, Trinidad Benham that just purchased Treasure Valley in our area, Wyoming Malting was there, Brees Malt Ingredients, Wyoming Sugar. So just a diverse group of agribusinesses. But what I wanted to say around this ag initiative, Wally was there, the ENDOW Council was a sponsor, the Wyoming Business Council was a partner, the Department of Ag was a partner as well with the university. We really brought forward researchers. So if anyone in this room would like information, I just handed Jack my only paper copy. But I'm happy to email you our outcomes because they support a lot of basically what everybody said here today. So thank you, and thank you council members for everything. There's a lot of amazing work. Broadband is clearly needed, so that was an easy initiative to support. So thanks for bringing that forward. The Innovation Center is a concept, but it's definitely one that's gained traction. And we have big private partners that are really interested in this Innovation Center. And I've visited some also, or I visited one, and we have on our calendar to visit a few more to see how that can help agribusinesses. Many of you in the room, my room, would hopefully be beneficiaries of that initiative. But if anyone wants information on that Ag Summit, I'm happy to provide it. So, and thank you, ENDOW Council, for giving me the opportunity. So, and it's a statewide thing. Ag is not just in Park County, in Park County. So, thanks.
Next, please.
So I forgot to introduce myself also. I'm Amy Henderson. I'm with the Wyoming Wool Growers, and I love to talk. So I'm up here again. But I just wanted to reiterate a message that we talked about, and we talked about, I mentioned here, and that is that we already have a very strong agriculture sector in Wyoming, and the thing that sometimes concerns me when we talk about diversity and things like that is that we're talking about something that's separate from it. And I think that whatever we do, we should build upon what we have. Because what we have is what provides a basis for our tourism, for our hunting, for our mining and our energy, because they're the landowners. And you know, Wyoming is complicated because we have the federal lands too, and so that in some ways that can make ranching difficult. But we still have a very strong industry, and I'll just use the sheep industry as one. Wyoming produces the finest wool in the entire country. We don't produce as much as we used to, but we got 10 cents more on average than any other state in the country. And that means that our wool is sought after. And so if we can build on that through the wool mill that we have here and really create something somewhere down the road where we are producing a product out of Wyoming native wool, clothing, fabric, whatever it is, that puts Wyoming on the map, and because a lot of people don't know where we are, but supports the infrastructure we already have, the industry we already have. I think it is something that we have to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm going to take just a second, not as a facilitator, but I'm Scott Cotton with the University of Wyoming Extension System. I've had the privilege to serve in this role for almost 30 years. About 2011, Ohio State and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln did a 4-year study looking at all the land transitions, the family transitions in about 14 states, including Wyoming. And that study came back and told us that in the next 13 years, 43% of the land parcels in this state are going to change hands. 43%. The majority of them will go to corporate ownership. The Wyoming Farmer Ranch Appraisers Association concurs with that estimate. The sad part is the same study said that over 80% of our youth entities in this state and Nebraska are immigrating out of agriculture and land management. That's the issue that I'd like to address. It's serious. It's a landscape killer. I mean, it makes a big difference in our communities. Without the families on the landscape, they can be working for corporations or something else, but for every 5 farms and ranches that we lose that are family owned and we go to corporate ownership, we lose about 80% of the community support on the local community, schools, churches, stores, neighbors that will help you do the fencing, the whole shooting match. So nothing wrong with corporate agriculture, but it's not really where I'd like to see it go. So I'd like to address those 2 things in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Yes, sir.
My name is Greg Phillips. I'm from Du Bois. And Du Bois is kind of an interesting community. It's been subdivided quite a bit over the number of years, and so it has not a big ag infrastructure anymore. The ranches have either gone to the game and fish, or they've been bought up by corporate people who run very small numbers and so on. So the infrastructure of our community, because timber is gone with the loss of the mills and stuff, we have a very small ag base. And so I think there's other communities like this in the state of Wyoming that have a need for some niche industries in ag, and I think we can, after today, I have some hope for us, actually, because we actually kind of run down the Crowheart. But we also need, small communities like us need something else, like technology, light manufacturing, things like this. And so that's where I'm hoping that the ENDOW and Wyoming Business Council, we can build on this. But I think we need to look at small communities like us that are still rural, but we just don't have the ag component anymore. So I'm hoping that everybody will keep that in mind as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Early. You usually have something.
Sure. Something that we forgot today was the timber industry. Thank you, gentlemen, for bringing that up. I don't know how to put this. I'm pretty politically incorrect, but the environmental axles run the timber industry right out of Wyoming. Because a lot of jobs with it. And I really think we ought to look at being able to do something to support the timber industry. 2 years ago, we burned up a whole bunch of that timber that would have been really good for our needs. But, you know, I couldn't think of everything today because I forget a lot, but the timber industry, I really think needs a leg up, and we have the timber. We just need to get the businesses back in here to harvest.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Jamie Tarver, and I ranch with my husband's family north of Gillette. And so even though I'm not as young as some folks, I still consider us kind of younger producers because most of our ag producers are older. And I'd just like to speak to the previous comments about the transition of land. I think it's the single most difficult topic to address, and I think it's the most vital to our ag industry in Wyoming. If we see this transition of land, then we see the transition of those families that have cared for and taken care of our natural resources for so long. And those natural resources are resources that support many of the other pillars in our house of ENDOW. The wildlife and tourism, the ag producers really do take care of those lands. The mineral industry, you know, with the open spaces. So I think we do need to address the transition of land and try to enable those family operators to stay in production. I think one of the challenges to keeping our youth in the industry is that they don't see, I mean, it's a tough road to hoe. And there's better jobs, more lucrative jobs elsewhere. And we need to find a way to make agriculture an attractive enterprise for young people versus an uphill battle. And I think the transition of land is one of the single greatest obstacles for those youth, as well as affordable health insurance. And it sounds like it's not really related to agriculture, but it so is. Since health insurance is often tied to employment, most ag folks are self-employed. And a lot of ag folks have to have a job in town so they can get health insurance, or they can't afford to be producers. So I think those are some of the real big elephants in the room that we gotta tackle.
Thank you. Jim or Dennis, any thoughts?
Go ahead.
Thanks for volunteering, Dennis.
Jump right up. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said here, but in wrapping up what we're talking about, ag or the rural here is it's all just a part of Wyoming. And whether you're a Du Bois or Casper or Cheyenne, you still need the same infrastructure, the internet, the air service, all of that comes. So it's good that, you know, we're not competitive with who gets what and all of this. We can't go that route, but we just have to say for one Wyoming, we all need it. It's there, and if we're all successful, then we all complement one another. And that's our main goal here, is to get the value added out and keep the youth in, and that's you know, hopefully that'll make for a strong Wyoming. And for those that travel outside the state and do business, you kind of also, people keep saying time and time again, you know, boy, Wyoming's always kind of at the lead doing a lot of this stuff, and I think that's true that Wyoming is. And I think by being in this room today, we've just proven those people right, that we are in the lead and we can do it. And I think we're off to a good start.
Thank you. Thank you. Jim, it's your turn.
I think everybody covered it pretty well. But what I would like to do is compliment all the groups, because even though it wasn't in the first and second, when you had the people coming up, you know, one of the big things that all the groups
as our Wyoming branding. So I think that is one of the, even though it wasn't, one or two on most of the list, I think that's one of the things that our rural council group is going to forward on to these folks, is because the name out there has value in the West and across this country. So I think if we can, get with our folks in tourism, get with the Wyoming Business Council, get with these folks, 40% of the heavy lifting, has been done with us there. So I think that is one of the things, that we need to leverage and go. Because, we've got a great name, people look up to our name, we want to polish it a little bit more and run with it.
Thank you. This would benefit Jamie and Dennis and Jim are all three on the Rural Council. I am too. I'd like to ask if any of the other facilitators would like to make any comments. Ladies first.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dina McDaniels, and I'm the County Executive Director for our Farm Service Agency for Natrona and Commerce County. And first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today and to take part in such an exciting thing that you're doing. Thank you all very much for having me. Our group had a really exciting day, and I think that they had a really, really difficult time coming to just 2 items. And I think at one point they were even asked, do we really have to just do 2? This is really important work that we do in agriculture. And one of the greatest things that I get to do every day is work with the agricultural producers in our community. And I get to work with a lot of our young people, and I'm starting to see more young faces in my office all the time. And some of the best things that they do in some of our families is some of their estate planning and working with some of their younger generations. And some of the biggest train wrecks that I see are those families that are losing their land, and the families aren't staying on the land, and it's one of the most heartbreaking things that we can see. So this is really important work that we're doing. It's really, really important. And I just want to say thank you very, very much for inviting me and letting me be a part of this, and I look forward to being a part of it from here on out. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Would like to thank you for inviting me and being a facilitator. I guess what I have is more of a question. It seems like we went to a lot of work and we got a lot of good information out there. And so what are the next steps and what are we going to do with the information? I guess that would be my next question, because I think there were some really good things that were said today, mentioned today, and I just wonder how we go forward with it. So,
okay. Well, thank you for those comments. Let me give you a game plan going forward. With the ENDOW process, before the first of the year, what we did, we received a lot of data, social economic data and things like that, and we visited with a lot of entrepreneurs around the state, and of course we came up with a preliminary report that we submitted to the legislature, and some of the things that just passed, like broadband and air service and computer science and some things like that, have been achieved. That was what I'm going to say was phase 1. Phase 2 is where we're starting right now. The easy part was trying to identify where our barriers were and what we needed to fix. Everybody knew it, it's just that we haven't done it yet. And so now we're into phase 2. Phase 2 is where we're starting to try to figure out, as our chairman says, to put some meat on the bone. And so we are, that's not on the screen, but the House of ENDOW, there's these 5 pillars there. And each of these pillars are a subcommittee. And this one is the one on agriculture, which we call sustainable harvest. Where we go from here is, this is the very first step. We wanted to get input from the grassroots coming forward. Then this committee will take all of that information, and when I say all of that information, everything that was said today, even though you didn't get it maybe prioritized or get it all the way worked out, we're going to take that information and we're going to try to prioritize it as a whole, let's put it that way. But some of the things that were said may not necessarily get addressed right now. However, we're going to say they're going into a parking lot. So this is a 20-year process. We can only bite off so much as we go, but we're going to take that all into consideration. So going from here, this information is jump-starting us to get the process going. We will be meeting, we have been meeting this small group, conference call every week, had a couple face-to-face meetings to put the structure together. And so the next step is to take this information plus decide where we're going with it, and then bring in expertise, and Haley's got information that will be provided to us as well, and then we'll start digesting it down. And the idea is we have to, once we get it, our arms around it, then we have to sell that to the entire executive council, as do all the other committees, and we'll put that together, and by statute we have to have our 20-year strategic plan, so to speak, to the governor by August 1st. So that's where we're going from here. Hope that kind of roundabout, but hope that kind of gives you up where we're at. Milt, you come forward, please.
First of all, thank you. I had a great group. It was fantastic. A lot of energy in there. And I guess the one thing that was said in there that may have got dropped, that stuck with me anyway, was the fact that we're doing some planning and some future. Keep them involved. Keep those young people involved. It is critical. It's critical to my future, for one thing. I'm going to pick my nursing home. And keep them rocking. Keep them rocking. We've got to keep them involved in this thing, because this industry is too critical to this nation and America. Thank you.
Thank you. One last time, anybody else out there have any comments they'd like to share with the group? Okay, well, don't stop us. So, I'm looking at my clock and it's right at 3 o'clock. So we're going to wind this thing down, but I'm going to make a few comments, and then I'm going to ask each one of the ladies up here to say something as well. But first of all, I want to express my appreciation to everybody for coming here today. The participation was good. I had an opportunity to go around. The groups were engaged. The reason the groups were engaged is because we had 4 very experienced and talented facilitators. So I tip my hat to each one of you. Also, we have staff here. We've got Ryan and Fong and Haley, and they're the ones that did everything behind the scenes to make it happen. You know, as I just got through saying, we've received a lot of data. Now we're listening to input, and we're going to be consulting with experts and then making recommendations. But what you need to know is we are simply an advisory board that works on behalf of you. And you're the ones that's going to tell us what to do. We're going to have to sort through it, but we're asking for your input. And ultimately, you could call the ENDOW Executive Council a think tank, because we're charged with how to create more high-paying jobs for our citizens, and then generating new sources of tax revenue for our state. And to do that, we're going to have to diversify and sustain and grow our economy. We are into the how are we going to do it phase. And this is just the beginning for us. This meeting is the kickstart, as I said before. So once again, I want to thank you for your participation, not only in the individual groups. What each one of you shared up here afterwards is important too. And so with that, I'm going to ask, go down the line, and Mary, any final comments?
Sure. No, I guess just again to thank everybody for taking the time to travel. Many came a lot of miles, and for all the participation for everybody here. This is great information for us to have. Also, just to say that even though we met here today, as you continue to think about things when you go home and on your drive, please get on the site where you have an opportunity to give us more input, because we'll be looking at that as well.
Aaron?
I think all of you got a little taste of the daunting task before us. You know, I think every time we meet, I think we get closer to what that final picture is going to look like, at least our efforts towards that. And so I just want to thank you all again for being here and helping us move forward on that 20-year plan.
Ray?
I just want to say thank you, because this was short notice, and look at how many of you have been with us all day today. So I can just tell you care about Wyoming. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'll echo those thoughts.
Echo, huh?
Yeah, let's talk about echo. When I called Scott Cotton just not too long ago, it just seems like a few days ago, I said, Scott, we're going to hold a ag forum in a week and a half, and we need to pull this together. I'm counting on you to help me. He got us those fantastic facilitators. Can't thank you enough. Thank you to everyone who drove from all over. That just speaks volumes to us, I think, and I just know that Wyoming's ag future is strong because of you. I mean, all of you showed up, and we're all in this together. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Haley. The last thing I will say is we have a sign-up sheet back here, and I don't know if all of you have had a chance to sign up. If you haven't, when you came in, you can do it on your way out. But also, we've had a request for the email addresses for the group, and so if you'd like to have a list of who's here and some of their contact information, you can go over here to Fong and give him your card or your name, and we'll be able to get that.
I just wanted to ask, when might there be another forum, and where? Do you have a few others intended?
Well,
we could.
Let me try to answer that. The ENDOW Executive Council will be getting together next week in a training session, actually, and then in a month or so later, we will be, I think, in Lander, Riverton area, and then after that, I think it's going to be about in June, we'll actually be over in Rock Springs. All of the meetings are live on Facebook.
You want me to give the dates for those?
Yes, sir.
So the next public endowment meeting is going to be in May 9th and 10th. It'll be in Riverton. And the next one after that will be June 28th and 29th, and that'll be in Rock Spring, Green River area.
As far as to your question on the forum, the public forum, earlier today, you might have saw or stood up another member of the ENDOW Executive Council, and he's a co-chair on one of the other pillars, and he said that he thought that they would. So I think we were the first ones to do it, but I think there's going to be others in the other sectors that are the pillars coming up. So I hope that helps.